In the realm of indie games, there are vastly different types of experiences that one could have. But among the most common you may come across is the 2D side-scroller. To be more specific, the Metroidvania. You've probably heard of the few really great ones such as Hollow Knight, Ori, Guacamelee, and so many others. These games excel at taking action platforming and making adventures out of backtracking, exploring, obtaining cool upgrades, fighting exciting bosses, and telling stories through gameplay. But surprisingly, despite having a subgenre literally named after it, the Metroid franchise has been lacking over the past decade or so. There was a good long while when I was younger when this was a healthy part of Nintendo's lineup of game releases. Metroid Fusion and Prime released to much acclaim after the series took a long hiatus following Super Metroid, and then the series continued to see both critical and commercial success with the rest of the Prime trilogy, Zero Mission, and Prime Hunters. But then... And also... The series eventually got back on good terms with the fans when Spanish developer Mercury Steam remade Metroid 2 as Metroid Samus Returns, but that release, in and of itself, presented a glaring problem that the series had faced for some years. You see, a big reason why the term Metroidvania was coined in the first place is that groundbreaking titles such as Super Metroid helped define what a Metroidvania even is. But the weird thing is that for how long the Metroid series has been around, there haven't been that many 2D side-scrolling Metroid games at all. We haven't gotten an original 2D Metroid game since 2002! But that's not for a lack of trying, because throughout the 2000s, Nintendo tried to get a sequel to Metroid Fusion off the ground. This project was rumored during those many long years, weaving in and out of development cycles under the supposed title of Metroid Dread. And then finally, on June 15th, 2021, it happened. So yeah, this reveal was a big deal, not just because it was announcing the first major Metroid game made for a home Nintendo console in a long time. It wasn't even a big deal because it was a long overdue sequel to Fusion. The important thing here is that it completely shattered expectations of this game ever coming out, let alone coming out as soon as it was. Now that I've had my chance to play through it after a consecutive marathon of the previous games, if I might add, I am so happy to tell you that this game is a near masterpiece. The painful wait for this game was worth it. Before sharing some unique thoughts on my own though, I feel compelled to address two popular points of criticism that have been levied against Metroid Dread. Let's talk about one of the biggest ones. Level design. So if you're familiar with any of the memes surrounding this game, chances are you have probably heard talk of a man named David Jaffe. He's a video game designer well known for his work on the original God of War games. But despite his pedigree, he's been the subject of internet ridicule due to his viral gameplay videos of him getting stuck at sections of Metroid Dread. My intention here is not to fuel the fire, for he's gotten enough flack as it is. However, he either missed vital information given in the game's tutorial, or he frankly just missed the point. A huge reason why I love Metroid Dread is that it's a game which respects the player's intelligence. You learn right from the beginning that if you get stuck, you probably need to start shooting a wall. So, that one part that infamously set David Jaffe off in a fit of rage, yeah, that took me like seconds to figure out. But more importantly, the developers simultaneously found a way to let the player figure things out on their own, yet also be guided along subconsciously. With games like Fusion and Zero Mission, the path forward was quite a linear one, with your directives being laid out before you without question. Dread is almost the direct opposite of those games, and that it encourages you to think things through and determine the next objective, but there are a number of things that make that more seamless than one may think. You see, unlike Super Metroid, as great as it is, you don't need to have a photographic memory of the map or run around aimlessly, hoping to just stumble upon your next progression point by chance. Hints are always given to the player here and there as to where they should go next. A big one for me was whenever a new portal or tram station opened up. Eventually, I came to understand that this meant that I should just go ahead and go that way, especially if my current set of abilities wouldn't let me explore any other parts of the area I was currently in. More often than not, my hunch proved to be right. Some excellent quality of life updates to the map system were also immensely helpful in comparison to previous 2D Metroid games. Once you discover that a destructible block needs a certain item to remove it, the map will remember this, saving you precious backtracking time in case you didn't remember. Also, if you've gone by a hidden item but haven't discovered its actual location, that sector of the map will glisten, indicating that you need to go find something. It was handy that the developers followed suit of other contemporary adventure games and included an item collection percentage meter for each area. This encouraged me to actually find all of the missiles, energy drinks, and the like. Not only is this the first 2D Metroid game I've gotten 100% completion for, I actually had a lot of fun doing so. All of the significant improvements made to pacing, world design, and player convenience make the latest Metroid adventure absolutely exhilarating. It's one thing that the planet ZDR is a dynamic, streamlined, and overall fun world to explore, but what makes it better is that Samus has never felt this smooth to control. The free aim mechanic introduced in Samus Returns still doesn't feel quite as great as it probably did in theory, but otherwise, she's extremely agile and versatile, and I love that the game is fully built to let the player feel her unbridled power. It's no longer cumbersome to wall jump, shine spark, or do any of her tricks really, since the controls and their placement on the Switch button layout feels quite comfortable to toy around with. Using abilities both old and new is so seamless that I almost felt like I was in a trance as Samus would bounce around the screen. And I really must stress that you do feel powerful as Samus. Despite the fact that the concept of Metroid Dread is that Samus is outmatched by foes much stronger than her, this is by no means a survival horror game. Metroid Dread has horror written on the marrow of its bones, but one will find that blood-pumping action is what keeps it energized. That wouldn't have worked if Samus didn't have a lethal arsenal at her disposal, but she most certainly does. I won't spoil every weapon or ability you can get in the game, but what I will say is that there is no boss you can't overcome. One of the little tips that is displayed during load screens, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that it's possible to dodge any attack that a boss will throw at you. I caught that tip very on in my playthrough, and because of that, I paid close attention to every single boss fight to make sure it wasn't a loaded statement. I'm happy to report that that tip was 100% true. Metroid Dread is a hard game, no doubt, probably one of the most difficult games in the series, but by no means does it earn that clout by being unfair or imbalanced. Each enemy you face has a weakness, and even at the start of the game, the controls and combat abilities have been fine-tuned so much that it truly is possible to dance around any foe that crosses your path. Not that it's easy to master the gameplay, but if you get a hang of the controls and weapon set, which are far better than any other 2D game in the series, you will find this game to be challenging, but not punishingly difficult. After all, most people I've listened to reviews for have said that they died tons of times facing many of these bosses, but that wasn't really my experience. I died maybe several times tops for some of them, but even for the final boss, I would get the hang of the fight after a few tries. The game simply rewards the player who pays attention to the mechanics, masters them, and thinks on their feet, which I absolutely love the game for. If you're struggling with the latter half of the game though, might I make a suggestion? Get as many missile upgrades as you possibly can, and then learn how to use the storm missiles in boss fights. The phase shift and wall jump abilities are also incredibly useful. You'll thank me later. Who knows, maybe my time spent with games like Cuphead have just prepared me for the intense combat offered here. I'm not necessarily trying to say that you just need to get good though. Metroid Dread is just a very fast-paced and action-heavy adventure that will get the adrenaline going. But I love the fact that it strikes that fine balance between giving the player enough tips to build a foundation on the basics, and then it respects the player enough to learn the amazing subtleties of the world design and controls. That's what upsets me when I see all of the criticism for this game being $60, which is the other thing I wanted to discuss. Yeah, that's a heavy price tag for a game that only takes about 10 hours or so to complete, I will admit. I've gone on record for not being a fan of how Nintendo prices their games in the past, but you have to think about the value that comes with that price. When you look at games like Portal 2 and Skyrim, these were both released in 2011 and sold at retailers for full AAA title prices. One has unique single-player and co-op campaigns that can individually be beaten in several hours each, whereas the other is an addictive time sink that one can easily invest hundreds of hours of their lives into. Yet, why are both games considered to be among the greatest of all time when one has tons more content than the other? It all has to do with the amount of value that is packed into that gameplay experience. You can go through the whole single-player story of Portal 2 in a weekend, but in that amount of time, what are you experiencing? You're gonna be hysterically laughing at the great jokes, you will be engrossed in the surprisingly deep storyline, and you will interact with some of the most creative environmental puzzles in gaming. Portal 2 is what I like to call concentrated quality. Metroid Dread is the same exact way. You may pay the same price for Metroid Dread as you would for massive open-world games that would take up more of your time, but the experience you will get from this game is an insanely entertaining rush of excitement and pure fun. There is action around every corner. There are worthwhile things to collect spread across the map, with some of those puzzles being immensely rewarding to figure out and solve. The boss fights are all awesome, the visuals are gorgeous, and if you have played all of the 2D Metroid games like I have, the way this game wraps up a story 35 years in the making was really satisfying, if perhaps the ending was rushed. There is not a dull moment to be had in this game. Well, I take that back. Some of the Emmy and water sections are just straight up garbage. But even so, one would be hard pressed to not have fun with this. I don't know, man. I'm just happy that something I was excited for actually delivered for once. And I don't mean that I hoped it would be good and it turned out to be just good. I hardly ever get hyped about anything these days, but as far as Metroid Dread is concerned, I haven't been this excited about a work of entertainment since Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was coming out. For me, considering some of the other stuff that has been released over the past few years, that's really saying a lot. But this game didn't just deliver, it actually exceeded my already lofty expectations. Despite some minor flaws here and there, I haven't felt this much pure enjoyment from a video game in a long time. Regardless if you are a newcomer to the Metroid franchise, this game should be a no-brainer purchase if you own a Nintendo Switch. For one thing, you'd be supporting a series that really deserves more love from Nintendo. But more importantly, you would be spending your money very wisely. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about Metroid Dread, and I hope that in the future you can come back for other video game reviews that I make. If you'd like to see more of any other type of content that I have made and will continue to make in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel and join the notification squadron so that you don't miss out on my future videos. Ladies and gentlemen, Samus Aran is back.